Hello, welcome to episode 153 in this series where I'm programming an NES game live on Twitch from scratch. Let's go. Starting the stream with an email from work congratulating me on being with the company for a year. So that's nice. Yeah, some of you may or may not know I started a new job last year, about a year ago, basically. That was a good thing. But that has nothing to do with what we're doing here. What we're doing here is we're working on level 1. And what we were doing last time was that we were trying to fix the fact that we could not get individual objects to spawn properly. We also worked on figuring out how this cool feature for the world view works, where we have the ability to stitch together two separate files that create one map. And the reason we're doing that is because this ocean one here is just a repeat area where we wanted to have the enemies laid out on the map, but the background doesn't matter because it's just going to repeat the same meta tile over and over again, and then eventually it will switch to this map, which will work like it always has, which has this little bit of land here for demonstration purposes. But we ran into a problem with these individual enemies not being able to be exported correctly because of changes we had put into the logic for exporting and for handling the spawn points and separating the sprites from the entities. So we introduced this new type object which has the ability to separate the entity and the sprite types. So we need to do that here for this part of the map. And then we can replicate those. And basically, I'm just creating, I'm just looking to create like a wave of enemies here. We can start looking at some different types of things, like I had talked about having some sort of barrier type enemy that you could maneuver around, and what that might look like and play like, you know, testing your maneuverability rather than just having enemies fly out and having to dodge bullets. We'll have kind of both of those things here. Right now, what I'm testing out is I'm creating this layout of enemies for the purpose of we're gonna build the repeat scroll functionality, and get that to work with a map file like we have with the map above, and then have the game actually load that. So, hey Yamato Special, how's it going? Actually, I meant to message you before the stream, but I got caught up in just doing some stuff around the house. If you're around afterwards, let's chat about that problem you were trying to solve, unless you've fixed it with the scrolling and the and loading the background, rather, not the scrolling, loading the background up. Just let me know. We can talk about that. All right, so got that here. And now in the export process, what we want to do is I'm going to go back to this project file here, and we had removed, or yeah, I had removed, so I'd removed this because we weren't ready to handle this yet, but I think we're ready to start implementing this. So right now this is going to look at the layout, and it's just going to look for these and assume that they're all the same, and it's going to look for the map name for this level. So what we need to do is we need to now have it understand what the difference is, because for a level that is just a repeat, we're not going to bother loading any. We're not even going to bother looking at like what the background tiles is. We're going to skip all that stuff and just export the objects that are part of that map. We probably still have to export sort of the bare minimum information about the map, like the dimensions, so that the engine can handle how all of that works. But yeah, what is going on here? My phone is blowing up. Nothing. It is just nonsense. Okay. And I was watching your 0 pages videos again. Super helpful. I found the Hello World video, and I can try implementing that similarly. I think I'm using ASM 6, so I may only have a difference. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Yeah, it should give you what you need, because it is essentially the same thing, right? It's loading the background from in a slightly different way, but basically the same. And as far as the syntax goes, yeah, I think it's probably pretty similar. I can't remember what ASM 6 has that's different, but yeah. Oh, hey gal, how's it going? All right, so what I think I want to do is just basically, when we're loading this up, check the type, and if it is a... What is this that I'm in? This is in load project, so it's loading up the levels. It's copying the map name in. Oh, sorry to hear you're sick. That stinks. Not to get too much into masks versus no masks. I will say that while everybody was wearing masks, I didn't get sick at all. Not even like, I usually got a cold every year around November, October, November, something like that. At least once a year around that time. And up until the point where people stopped wearing masks, I wasn't getting cold. As soon as we did anything where we had people who came to visit and we weren't wearing masks, I got a cold, a pretty bad sinus cold, which is usually what I get. But I was like, of course, that's what happened. That was not fun. And the baby also got a cold too. He was okay. It wasn't as bad for him. For me, it was. I definitely was very upset at being sick again. Yeah, no, I know, and that's the thing. It's like, we mask too, but if other people aren't masking, it doesn't matter. So it's kind of like, you know, anyway, I don't want to get into it because it's just going to make people mad. I'm going to get random people commenting in the YouTube video telling me that I don't know anything about anything and that it was just a coincidence that I wasn't getting sick and that nobody in my family got sick for that entire time. So I'm just going to stop. But yeah, sorry, that sucks. It's tough when the kids get it, especially if you're sick at the same time, because then everybody is kind of unhappy, and it's hard to help the kids when you're not feeling great yourself. So, all right. So right now, I kind of did this in a short-sighted way where it was just using the one map here and loading it into map file name, which is a parameter that comes into load project, and load project yeah, no, don't worry. I know you're not. I'm just saying, like, under normal circumstances, I'm happy to have the discussion because I feel like people on the chat are probably easy to have that discussion with, even with people who are I've had plenty of decent discussions with reasonable people who, have differing opinions, but you know how the internet is. So yeah, MDTA UK. Yeah, I know. That's kind of the funny thing is that, for years you see tourists from Asia and in videos of Asia, people wearing masks, and it seemed like kind of a weird thing to people in Western countries. But now I think I see the light. So yeah, so this is only loading the one file, which is sort of problematic because the whole point was that it should be able to handle multiple. So we need to fix this. I wasn't anticipating that. I thought I handled that properly, but clearly not. So then the question becomes, if I am only using the one map file name there, let me go back to the code calling it, then the map file full path is called in the export here. Okay, that's not bad, because then I should be able to just keep calling that for every file, I think, since I'm not using it or referencing it anywhere else. That's not that bad. How does your map object placement handle having too many objects in quick succession? I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't. The only limitation on object placement right now is that the Y value of the object can't be the same as the Y value of another object, and that's purely for the way that the object creation is done. Wait, is that true? I think that's true. I'm pretty sure that's true, because basically we make sure the objects are sorted in descending Y order, and only check the next object until it spawns, and then we go to the following object, and then when that spawns, we go to the so it's an optimization from the perspective of I don't want to have to go looping through every single. I don't want to have to go through looping through every single object to spawn them. So it just makes sense to do it that way. Sprites and sharing scan. I mean, yeah. So there's no provision in the engine itself or in the placement here where it warns you or has anything other than the hardware sprite reordering that we were looking at the other day to deal with the scan lines. So it doesn't do anything here in the game. It shuffles around the hardware sprites with the entities that are in use so that it should flicker evenly to prevent sprites from disappearing. But We really haven't gotten into it enough that I can say that that works 100%. It's a pretty basic implementation, but it should work. So what do I want to use here? Do I want to just be lazy and use a vector of strings? It's kind of, well, I'm using a deck of entities already. So I was going to say it kind of violates what I was doing with some of the C stuff, not using C++, but you know, I was using some of that. I had switched to some of the C++ stuff just for the sake of convenience, like the JSON parsing in the C library that we were using was, I mean, it was serviceable, but it was really kind of awful. Like the implementation was very, very heavily raw string tokenizing, so it really didn't work in a way that I was particularly happy with. And the, you know, the flip side is, of course, the flip side is you go, you know, full object oriented with something like that, but then, you know, that's kind of feels like overkill a little bit. But it is what it is. Sometimes you just got to do that kind of stuff because that's what you have available. I didn't feel like writing my own JSON parsing. And seeing as how, so one thing to mention, you know, there's been, just do searches, you'll see that like the standard template implementations of these things are not generally performant, at least not from a game development perspective. I was looking at, I can't remember whose Twitter it was, but somebody posted a quick analysis that they did of the standard template implementations for maybe vector and deck. I don't remember. A couple of these types, and then they compared it to one that they implemented on their own. And you know, on the one hand, it doesn't cover all the super duper edge cases that this does, but on the other hand, the compilation was substantially faster and the performance was also substantially faster. And when I say substantially, I mean like 5 to 6 times better from what I recall. So, you know, for something where you're going to be running that in a loop, that's a huge gain. For this, it doesn't really matter. We're running this, you know, one time. It's really not a big deal. And that's something I hope that people are getting out of, if they get nothing else about what I'm doing here when it comes to optimization. It's really important to understand where it's wise to optimize, because there are so many people who talk about optimization and they focus on, you know, squeezing performance out of loops and stuff like that, or algorithms, I should say. But it's, I mean, I guess there are more now, but you know, there used to be sort of a lack of focus on pointing out that you should be optimizing where it counts and not just optimizing for the sake of optimizing. So yeah, like you have a bad sorting algorithm and maybe it's whatever, maybe it's n squared, right? That's bad. But if you only do it once, and you're not dealing with a large data set, it's probably not that big a deal, you know? I mean, if it takes 500 milliseconds instead of 100, or whatever the case might be, right? Like, that one place that you're doing it isn't a big deal. Now, if that's in a loop, and you're doing that hundreds of times a second, yeah, you want to optimize that, because you want to be able to run that as many times as possible, as quickly as possible, especially if that's something that a user is waiting on, right? Like, forget about games, but if you're doing, you know, some sort of productivity app or something like that, you you want the user to wait as little as possible. I think that's another thing that seems to be lost in modern development, but yeah. Fortunately, you're only writing the tooling for yourself, so you don't have to add workarounds, warnings, catching issues with. Yeah, no, it's true. Writing tools for yourself is definitely different than writing it for people. Like, if there's no way I could, sell this, right? And that's one of the things when you look at some of the tools that are out there for NES development, where they're good and they do a pretty decent job, but they're super counterintuitive. I'm not going to name any names. Go away, Adobe. And yeah, and so it'd be nice if we could come up with something that worked well for everybody and was nicely built. I know Sumez is working on something pretty cool, but I don't know how much progress he's made on that and when he expects to have that out. But and for those of you who don't know Sumez, he, I think, is probably most noted for a couple of things. One is his port of... Hold on a second. One is his port of Donkey Kong to the NES, where he did a really nice implementation, and it's actually flipped the same way as the arcade version, where the CRT is rotated, which is really cool, and then also gets around the horizontal sprite limitation. And then he also recently in the last 4 years maybe, he wrote a web-based NES emulator that works really well. Let's see, like the difference between problem solving and theoretical problem solving, or purity. Yes, yeah, exactly. You got to focus on where the time is, not on. Like, that's the thing, and I think I've mentioned this too. Like, you look at a profiler, right? You look at your code profiler, and you can be like, "Oh man, this function takes 5 seconds to run," but you fail to look at the fact that it takes 5 seconds one time, versus something that takes maybe 750 milliseconds, but 20,000 times, and maybe you could optimize that and save a lot more than 5 seconds by optimizing that thing. All right, so it's going to let me do this without complaining? I think it will. So I'm just adding these file names. Although, see, I was talking, I wasn't really thinking about this too carefully. Realistically, we probably want this to be some sort of structure where it has a little bit more detail about whether it's a map that is just a map, or if it's a map that is a repeat scrolling map. Yes, generally the VBlank, like in your NMI, that is going to be a critical place to optimize, because that's where you have the least amount of time, generally speaking, and it can impact the way the game runs. Now, there are other places where you may have optimization you have to do, like if you're doing any sort of rasterization effects or screen splitting, with horizontal line timing. Those things are going to be very timing sensitive, and so optimization is going to be key there too. All right, so let's do this, because I probably want to do something like this. Right? Something like that. All right. So let's go back to my code here and oh wait. So let's do this. Yep, you're correct with what you're saying there related to the pause. All right, so oops. What's the matter with this? Well, it's yeah. What are you talking about? It's a struct. Info doesn't my. All right, let me deal with this here. So map type is, let's just make this happy for a second. Why are you complaining? Info, map info, expression must be a modifiable L value. It is map info, type def struct, map info, okay. Map file name. I'm just declaring it in map info. Why don't you like that? Is there something else called info here that you're unhappy with me? No, I don't see anything. I will be doing more zero-page episodes in the future, yes. In how soon, I don't know. As soon as I can. Right now, I'm really trying to focus as best as I can on getting more of this work done. Once I feel like we've made some good progress here, I'll definitely get back to zero-page work. Alright, why are you... Oh wait, did I did do that, didn't I? Like a dummy, I made this a character instead of a string. Okay, that's not a big deal. What we'll just do is we will eliminate this. Move this here. I gotta get back into like being able to talk and code at the same time. It's a little bit like I've lost my mojo. and then I just end up breaking things. Okay, so this is a... Yeah, okay, cool. So now we've got our map file's full path, and then we just need to find that code where it was doing this with the map file full path. Where is that defined? I'm going to get rid of that by commenting it out because I don't believe we need it anymore. I think there's only one place that uses it at this point. Let's see what the compiler says. Compiler says I am correct. Great. So let's see, for standard deck, no, let's just do it this way. Iter equals standard bit of map file. It's called, what did I call it? Map files, full path, something. Map files full path. Begin. Iterator doesn't equal map files full path end. Add to the iterator. And then in the iterator, we want to pass that. It's sort of like rubber ducking myself. That sounds weird. It's sort of like rubber ducking. And sometimes I'm a little bit more focused if I'm just kind of looking at the code and typing and talking. But it also can be distracting to have to explain, or I think of something that's like unrelated and then go on a tangent and then I don't remember what we were doing. But that's okay. I like that element of it because it's fun to actually have people be here and participate and like have an interest in what's going on. All right. So let's just check what we've done this far, because clearly I've been super focused and haven't made a single mistake to this point. What I want to make sure is that we get the right map types coming in when we call export map with the appropriate map file. So Ocean 1, and that's a repeat scroll. Okay. I don't know if I want to have that try and export. Let's assume that the second one will be okay, given that the first one was okay. So the difference then becomes here that we want to stop the process of exporting the background. Like we want to load the whole thing like we're doing here. So that'll be okay. But then we just want to essentially skip that export process. I guess we could skip the process of determining the meta tiles too. And then all of this stuff, interesting. So this stuff, the exporting of the game entities, it's kind of like we're going to end up doing it multiple times. Additionally, the export when it loads the map, we get a map palette. And that will also update depending on what's in the map. So that's not correct either. Let's curious to see what this does once we load the map. I mean, it should work fine because it's really not that different. The only real difference is that we don't care about the background. So if we come to here and we look at what's going on, The map width. Can we switch to decimal for a minute? Thank you. 16,225. Really? That seems wrong. Let's see. Height is 450 here. So the question is why? Why? Is it some sort of byte precision thing? Is load map not getting... No, map height would be an int, so that's okay. Alright, let's see what is going on in here. Oh wait, that that height, is that the height in tiles? Map properties. It's 450. Yeah, okay. No, it has nothing to do with it. I was curious if there was some sort of 450. Oh, okay. It is. I'm adjusting based on that it's tiles. So, but the width and the height are also in tiles. So is that just a bug? I don't know. Tile width, tile height. That seems right. So where's that getting messed up? Or we're dividing it in half. Oh, right, because in meta tiles that would be half. Okay. No, that's fine. That makes sense. I forgot that that is a size based on the number of meta tiles, not based on the actual tiles. That makes sense. Okay. And so then this, let's see, that is all of the enemies that are placed. So that looks good. Map object count, there are 14 objects. I don't remember if we used that. And then here's the palette, which there is nothing in there. So what I'm going to do for now is I think what I'll do is I'll skip the... You know what I'll do? Let's do this in meta tiles. This makes the variable name a little bit longer, but it will also be then clearer. Because a comment is probably fine, but here, let me do it this way so I don't have to be typing this everywhere. But this will make it very clear. Yes, so like if it's an algorithm thing, yes, I agree. That is when you should have a comment. For something like this, it's the parameter was unclear, so renaming the definition is probably the better option, because then I can highlight this and I can look at the width and height in the definition and say, oh, map height and meta tiles, right? And then it's clear. All right, so let's do this. If map type is not equal to repeat scroll, it's almost like I'm intended for this if block to be here the whole time. Actually, I did this because I just wanted this to go out of scope when I was done with this portion of the code, but it just happened to work out nicely that way. So now we're going to run into a problem here where if we have multiple map sections, we're still going to export more times than we need to, but that's okay for now. There's other issues like I believe the palette names. Yeah, so we only have this one palette table. That is gonna be a problem when we have multiple maps that have different palette sets. So like this is why I probably should have started with like, we're building level 1. What code do we need to support that? Because ultimately, it's like you can build all the code you want for an engine for a game you're just imagining. It's a lot different when you actually have to go code the thing. That's why one of the nice pieces of advice somebody once gave, actually it was Casey Muratori. He didn't give it to me directly. He gave it in a speech that he did, a presentation that he did for some conference about API design. He was, one of the things he recommended, and this is a really great recommendation, is like approach writing the API from the perspective of writing the code that you want to call the API first. Like, how would you want the API to work if you were the person using the API? So put together an API, like a fake program that uses the non-existent API to get a sense of how that should come together, and then work backwards from there. He had a bunch of other tips. It's actually a really good presentation. If you've never seen it, I recommend it. He has it on his website. What is his website, though? Is it just... I know he's got Molly Rocket. MollyRocket.com. He's got a bunch of different projects going on, but in... Where is his... Oh no, what happened to my browser? There we go. In his... There it is. In his tech stuff... Yeah, this one. Designing and evaluating reusable components. Take a look. It's pretty cool. I thought it was really good. Good advice when you were building private APIs. Yeah, and so like what I was saying, I think I said this last time, but if not, I'll repeat it. Even if I did, in that way, the background doesn't really even matter. It's more about the enemies. Like, the backgrounds will matter at some point, especially if we want to try and do something like animations or whatever. But I should have spent more time working on putting together a map that actually makes sense to play, and then from there, worked to build the code around that. So I need these to exist outside of here, but what I want to do is just this is okay all the time, right? Like if it's repeat scroll or whatever, we want the map object data to be exported. In this case, we don't. Yes and no. I mean, it depends on what your focus is on, right? Like if your focus is on the move set and not the levels, then yeah. But it could be a combination of things, right? Like you could be testing specific concepts about your game design that you need to start building actual test levels for, to see what you want to do, and obviously the code implementation kind of comes out of that, because then you realize like, oh, I need to be able to do this and that. So I should probably get rid of all of this crap. There's a bunch of code that's commented out now as we've kind of changed the way things work, but now is probably not the time to do it. Get the screen into the asset tool finally, so we don't have to start like other than 0. So what is this? This is a metatile exports, metatile collisions, metatile palette. So all of that stuff can all be skipped. And then from here, this is the map portion is done, and then we have all the sprite stuff. I may have to split this. I mean, this method is huge, so I probably should have split it up anyway, because there's just so much stuff in here. Let's just get this working, and then I can work to refactor this later. And we definitely will, because there's stuff that it's going to do multiple times. It's redundant. It's going to export things multiple times. We don't need it to do that. The main thing I wanted to do is have it export the objects for that Ocean 1 level, and not any of the other data related to it, because it's not important. We literally only care about the fact that there are these objects here on the level. So if we just go for it here, it crashes. Okay. I am not surprised by that. It was a pure leap of faith there that would work anyway, so you know. Stack was corrupted. Okay. That is not as bad as I thought it might be. Why did that get stack around map meta tiles got corrupted? Alright, let's take a look. I don't think we actually use that anywhere in... So there's that that call there. Where else is that used? Oh, it's used quite a bit here. Oh, but the problem is that we probably don't... Oh, well, we wouldn't be calling that here, right? We should be coming into this portion of the code. Okay, we're not, so that's good. Probably always good to verify your assumptions about stuff like that. We would on the next loop through when we were processing the regular map. But the first time through, it should just be skipping this because we're on the repeat scroll. So let's go take a look at the references here. Maybe we will refactor this just for the sake of like taking a look at cleaning up this mess. So we reference it when we're loading the map. If it's not repeat scroll, so we're not calling it in there. We're not calling it in there. Are we doing anything here? No. And then, so we are using it here for the sprite type portion. I think what we'll do is probably just skip that if we're dealing with a repeat scroll anyway, because what is this doing? Start boilerplate for entity include. This is just the sprite type export. And we shouldn't be really doing this tied to the one map anyway. Again, this really needs to be refactored. I'm just trying to make like the bare minimum changes to get it to export the stuff that we need. Map buffer. So I'm guessing this is probably the same kind of problem. Oh, map buffer probably, well, it has a size associated with it, but it shouldn't, none of that stuff should be calling into it. It's probably just, that's just clearing it out. Oh, it's probably, no, it doesn't call. It's not doing any lookups there, so it's not that, or it shouldn't be. We'll double check that, but it shouldn't be doing anything there. Same thing with that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that. So interesting. So why are we getting that stack corruption when we are not doing anything? It must be something around that variable. Stack around variable map buffer was corrupted. Let's try something. Let's try, if we don't mem set this, what is, does it still, it should still give the same error. I don't think this is the problem. Because we're just literally setting it, yeah, okay, I didn't think so. So we're just literally setting it to the size that it, you know, setting zeros for the size that it is. Probably more likely it is one of these still. And if I had to guess, it's probably still this map meta tiles, because this was something that we were just seeing was in use and shouldn't have been. But this is all that's all out of scope at this point. I guess we could get rid of all of this. Like, we could just kind of have the same checks here for everything. Because again, it's really not necessary for the repeat scroll map to do this, and this just makes it even that much more messy. It's kind of making me cringe a little bit that this is how we're doing it. So we will refactor this, but the goal is to get this export working right now, and then we can go back to this. It's still corrupting. Actually, let's do this. I didn't bother checking what the map type was here. Okay. I just assumed it was repeat scroll, but I just wanted to make sure, because then I didn't want to come back and find out that it was a regular map, and that something I did there was broken and causing this. So, okay. Should I just get rid of this commented code? I feel like we should. It's not being used anymore. We haven't needed it for quite some time now. So let's get rid of that to clean up some of this. And all right, so like, we're not really calling any of this except for the object export. So, I mean, this is really the only place where we would potentially be having, like, here, let's say if false. So it's going to do nothing. Let's see if we still get the stack problem. Huh, what is this actually doing then? Is it, oh, is it too small? What is the size of that? It could be that it's too small. I didn't think about that. What did I say it was? It was 450 divided by, no, 450 divided by 16. Divided by 2. 225 by 16. 3600. That is not bigger than 8K. But when it's loading the map, is something else too big? Map buffer size. Map buffer is 8K. Let's go into load map and see what's going on here. There must be something else that is making it unhappy related to the stack, and it's just happening to hit that there. I can't remember it. I feel like there's a way to have it be, well, if that were the case, then wouldn't it would complain about that on exiting this method, the load map method, because it would detect the stack corruption on load map. So can't remember. I feel like there are a few debugging options that you can use to be a little bit more aggressive about checking this kind of stuff, but then obviously it slows the code down. But do I bother with that right now, or do I just or do I just try and figure it out? Merge section, CLR, blah, 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 blah. Entry point. So checksum, base address. Set checksum. No. Man, I wish I remembered. I could also be misremembering. It's been a while since I've messed with those. A couple jobs ago, we were dealing with some weird, bad memory problems, and I thought I remembered that there was a way to add some additional stack checking, but I'm not seeing anything. I'm just seeing these options. I could be misremembering, or it could be something that is like a feature of the library we were using at the time. Code generation. Structure memory, security check enables security check. This is part of it. Like that, we want this, right? Like for basic buffer overruns, but I thought there was more than that. Runtime checks. We're doing all of those. I guess we're using the things that we need to. So, okay, so how, what would be the thing causing the problem? This is it's a pretty large map. I don't think we're running into any issue related to like the number of meta tiles, because it should just all be the same. Let's see what info this comes back with once it loads the map. See if there's anything that looks suspicious. So the object count is 14. Those are the actual objects. The object size is 100 maximum. That's the height. That's the width. Map meta tiles is... did anything... That's weird. Nothing got set for that. Map meta tiles. Where is that defined? That is defined there. There are 100 of them. So, how come that has, like, not good stuff in it? Discovered meta tiles. Wait a minute. So, I've got this, which has 100 meta tiles, but then this could potentially have 4,000, but that's the raw meta tiles. That's not when we consolidate it down. So that's zeroed out. That's weird. Where... find the references to this. So max meta tile buffer is 100 times the size, so we're just gonna clear that out. When you do animations or changing palettes on the fly, can you conceptually explain how that works? Yeah, 1 second. I will talk about that. So then we will do a string copy. Is it copying into the image? That's the source, but that has nothing in it. Memsat. That is in load map. Oh wait, I'm looking at the wrong... No, I'm looking at the right thing. So... But where... That has nothing in it. Here we're just emptying it out. We're passing this in. Load map is being called as part of export map. So that should have information when we come in here. Is that what? There's nothing in it. Where is my breakpoint? Map meta tiles. So there's nothing in here. I thought it was getting loaded in there, but is this... What is this used for? Map meta tiles. Pass it to load map. And then I thought in load map, unless I'm looking at the wrong, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the fifth parameter. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 map meta tiles. So I did call it the same thing. So I was only using it for tile sets, which means that it's really not used anymore. And this is the implementation. This is the thing we ran into last stream, where it used to be that enemies were tile sets in the map, and then we changed that because of the way we were doing the spawning from the spawn points, and so that was messing up some of the code that we had. So I wonder, like, if I come into meta tile count, is that 0? It is 0, so we never actually set anything there. But why? You can see this got set to something else. So what's causing that? Is that because the buffer in here is too small for the map because it's such a large, long map? That's possible. I wonder if that is causing it, because that would make sense. Like, we're seeing 0, 4, 15. Is that what that value is? I bet it is. Oh. Or was it 1045? I don't even remember what it is now. My memory is shot today. Hi, map meta tiles. So nothing here, and then we're gonna go. Yeah. 4, 5A, and that's what I said, right? It's 5. What's 4, 5A? 4, 5A decimal. 4, 5A. Oh yeah. Okay. All right. So that's what it is. Something about the map. It's too big. It's not fitting in, and we're getting a buffer overrun. I guess in the map that we're passing in, because why? Because the actual size is what, 450 by 32, and that's probably bigger than 8K. It sure freaking is. Okay. So load map. So our map buffer size is too small. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to write a check for that right now so that we don't run into this problem again. So in meta tiles, here's the code where we're getting the width and the height. If TW times T height is greater than map buffer size, or actually, we'll do it this way. Let me get a big old fat assert. So we should get the assert now. Maybe. We're not getting the assert? Why not? map buffer size. Am I changing that value? It's coming in as a pointer here. Let me guess. I'm just changing the size without, yeah. All right, so that assert is poorly placed. And what I should do is, first of all, it should not be doing this because, let's see, max map buffer is that map. So this is all like premature here because we should be checking to make sure that we are in a situation where we can actually support what we're doing here. So if, no. If data assert data size is less than or equal, less than or equal to max map buffer size, right? And what are you complaining about now? Oh, is it just max map buffer? I thought that was a pointer. It is a pointer? What is it? Max map buffer. I have max map buffer, but I also pass in the map buffer size. Okay, well, we can do both. Map buffer size. I don't know that Microsoft has this convention of you pass in a pointer and the value in the pointer is the size of your buffer. And then if it's less than, it returns it with the size that it actually is, or it will fail because the buffer is too small. I'm not sure I'm crazy about the convention. I mean, it's not the worst, but it is also not great. It was done purely, I think, to like save space, and clearly I am not concerned about that right now. Okay. So let's see, this should give us the error we're looking for. So it's 8K, and the size is going to be bigger than that, and okay. And then if it's fine, then we will initialize the whole thing. We'll set the size to be the thing there. That's all good. So, okay. Now that we've ironed that out, apologies that took so long because it was not clear. I mean, it makes sense that it's doing that, but it was also, I was not expecting it, because basically what happened was it was this corrupting that. Because map meta tiles isn't used anymore, so it should just be all 0. Why is string format buffer 8K? Go to definition. What are we even using this for? I don't even remember. String format buffer. Oh, it's just a general buffer for stuff that we're doing with the code generation. Okay. I guess that's acceptable for now. We want to make it 16K. Go really crazy. We were having a discussion at work about getting new laptops, and obviously with the chip shortages in place, there are delays getting new computers from all manufacturers. And somebody commented that 32 gigs of RAM was really not enough for our development environment because we're running Docker and stuff like that. And I made the old Bill Gates 640K should be enough for anyone joke. I'm not sure that anybody got that joke though, except for one person. But it's kind of crazy to me to think about the fact that people need 32 gigs of RAM on their machines to do anything that isn't like video editing. All right, cool. So we got Ocean 1 object, which is what I was hoping for. So that means that that exported properly. And that's only 141 bytes, which is perfect because it's, I think it's the size plus the number, plus, and then however many objects. I think they're like 10 bytes each, something like that. Yeah, so 14 objects at 10 bytes each, 141 bytes. That is excellent. And then the other question becomes, what else got messed up by the changes we made here? So there are these export includes. In the code itself, I believe is where we... No? Oh, I'm surprised. I thought for sure. Oh, because it's map 1. So we gotta export some of this data separately here, but this is also going to be problematic. Because this is going to be something else that we need to reference. That is data related. So yeah, like as I'm building all this stuff, I'm finding all the things that I messed up. That's okay. That is part of this process and why we're doing it this way. Let's talk about animations real quick. Well, let's actually talk about palettes on the fly real quick. So there is, just like we have these other objects here on the map, you can place objects just as you would for palette changes. So I created a type in the map editor to be able to specify what the palette colors are and which palette we're changing on the hardware. Because if you go to if we open up Messen here for a second, and you look at the PPU, right, we've got 4 background palettes and 4 sprite palettes. So you can specify any one of the 8 palettes here by putting in a value of 0 through 7. And what it does is when it finds one of those objects on the map, it will add the entity for a palette change, which is a type of entity. It's kind of a, I don't know, I wouldn't say it's weird, it's just the way I decided to do it. So these are all things that can exist in the game at any point. So like explosions, this generic bullet type, the player, that cloud that flies through that's blue in the beginning. But Pallet Swap is one of those entities. And so there's actually code that says if you find an entity that's a pallet swap, it should jump to this, and then what it will do is it will store that we want to reload the pallet. This is a flag that says we want to reload the pallet, and it does it at a specific time, so you don't swap the pallet in the middle of drawing, because that would create a weird effect. So we're just basically saying, okay, yes, we want to reload one of the pallets, and then we have 4 bytes. We have the first color, the second color, the third color, and the fourth color. Obviously, this is the background color, so if you change that, that could potentially have a pretty dramatic effect on the screen. And then the last thing that we need to specify is where 0, 2, 3. Where do we set the palette itself that we want to swap? Maybe we can't change the background color. Well, we have a spot for background. Maybe I gotta look back now because I don't remember. Let's see what it does here. Load repallet branch if equal. So if this is 0, then just skip our jump to the next label here, right? Otherwise, it will clear out the flag, transfers A to X for us because we wanted 0, so that's just a fast copy to set X to 0. And what is this doing? This is just clearing out and storing. Is it only doing it in the first palette? Well, that's not supposed to be what it does. I guess it was a I guess it was like a temporary thing that I never finished. Okay, so it's supposed to load which palette it wants to reload and then do that. Instead, right now it's just assuming you meant the first palette. And by the first palette, I mean specifically this one, which starts at palette address 3F00. You can see that in this little window here if I mouse over it. So what it's doing, I mean, the code, the implementation itself is fine for changing the palette, but is not honoring the palette number that you're specifying here, which it should. So it then what it does is it sets up the memory write by clearing the latch by reading 2002. It then writes 3F00 to 2006 to tell the PPU that, hey, I wanna write to that address. And then it just does this load store sequence 4 times. I just did this repeat 4 as like a macro just because it was fast to do that. So it's, if you think about this just being copied and pasted 4 times, that's all it's doing. So it reads new palette X, so the first color, and then stores it, then it increments X, and then it does it new palette 1 for X, and then does it. So each time it's taking background palette 1, palette 2, palette 3, and storing it into background palette 1, palette 2, palette 3. And this is in the NMI. This is in the interrupt handler for the virtual blank, or sorry, the vertical blank, right before we actually deal with the sprite copy, where we tell the PPU to copy out of our memory for the sprites to be drawn. So Yeah, I need to add some code here to handle that. Let's do to do. This does not honor the offset of the pallet requested. Need to fix this. I mean, it's a simple fix because each of these is offset by just by 4, including the pallets for the sprites. Like this is one, even though this is separated into 2 sets of pallets, this is one contiguous set of 32 bytes, right? 16, yeah, 32 bytes. And so I should just be able to take the pallet number and multiply it by 4 to get the pallet offset that I want. So like if I want to modify this one, treat this as pallet 5 and do a, 5 times 4, that would give me 20. Is that right? Oh, sorry, that's technically pallet 4 because it's pallet 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that offset is offset by 16, which is the 10 that you see in the little pallet address thing down there. This is 20, which is 14 hex. Right. So that's how the pallet changes are happening. And again, this is in NMI. So if I go back to this code here, so that's where that's my NMI handler. What did I call it? Reload pallet. It's a little bit further down because there's some code for handling, processing what game state we're in, if it's the title screen, if it's paused, if we're playing the game. And then if we're playing the game, the first thing it does is it checks to see if the pallet needs to be reloaded. If not, then it just processes the sprites the way that you would expect, and then processes scrolling in terms of updating the screen memory. And we do have... Does it do this every time? So there are some cases where it will reload the attribute table, and it just brute forces that right now. This is one of those things where I said eventually we'll probably not be able to do this, but it was... oh wait, no, I'm sorry. This is actually when it loads the row. Right. So this is when you go through the process of scrolling and you determine that a new row needs to be loaded, that new row gets put into this new tiles area of memory, and then it just blasts those into the PPU. It puts that into the name table. So like as the scrolling like gets into here, it will take that next row and just in 32 writes go bam right across the screen there and write that row of tiles. And it only does that when a new row needs to be loaded. There is this part. That's what I was talking about with the attributes. I forgot. So it will then also force an attribute update where it rewrites all the attributes. Again, that's probably not the most efficient way to do it, because realistically it should just be updating only the attributes in the name table that need to be. But it was the simplest implementation at the time, and I was already kind of burned out on... Excuse me. I was burned out on implementing attribute changes because of how long it took to do it in the first place, and then having to revisit to go from 32 by 32 metatiles to 16 by 16 metatiles. So that was a whole thing. So that's why this works that way. It doesn't do it unless it needs to update it because of new tiles being written. So it's not doing that every frame. But I could see where eventually that might be something I have to optimize, because I mean, it's only 64 bytes, but and I did it this way because this is faster than using an actual loop. It's for a variety of reasons, unrolling a loop is faster on older processors. So I just use this repeat to make it more efficient. Again, this is another place where it's, we could end up needing to save those bytes for the code on the program because it's like, we're over by 32 bytes or something like that. We have to figure out how to save some space, and so maybe that's our optimization. Maybe it's fast enough to do it in a loop, and instead of just blasting it in by effectively copying and pasting this 64 times. I don't know. The animation is a little bit different. The animation is, and this is going to have to change at some point, but the animation works by, there's this code that gets generated by the export utility. Who is texting me right now? Oh Lord, stop texting me. Sorry. What was I saying? Oh, so yeah, so the export tool is looking at the sprites that are created. If they're simple, then it's just a simple tile update. If it is not simple, like it's got an actual animation like the explosion, then the actual draw is pretty complex in that it will basically have a bunch of different checks. It has to check what frame it is on the animation, and then it jumps to the frame that it's drawing, and then it updates in this case 4 sprites that with the appropriate tiles. So like this is frame 1 of the animation. It updates the top left sprite, then the top right sprite, then the bottom left sprite, and the bottom right sprite. And then once you go to frame 2, it would do the same thing but over here, and so on and so forth. So Felipe Renaud had commented in another stream, and he's right about this. This was done purely because in early streams, implementing animation using data was not working, but I was also probably doing that all in the NMI, and so it was not optimally handled because it shouldn't be handled there because you have so little time in there. So it could be data driven, where instead of doing this, it knows that like there is essentially a table of data that says, for, let's pick a simple case like player neutral sprite. Instead of having it hard coded that it's like tile 21, index 21 and palette and mirror 0. Right, and same thing with tile index 22 and stuff like that. That it knows based on the size of the actual object, the actual sprite being 16 by 16, so it's 2 by 2 hardware sprites since they're normally 8 by 8. If you look, right, it's four hardware sprites, even though it's one object. The data could say, the first one is 21, second one is 22, third one is 23, fourth one is 24, and, handle the laying out of the sprites based on the data. Store that into the sprite mem in the main game loop, not in the NMI, and then only just cause the read in the NMI to happen. So yeah, so that's kind of messy, but basically it's just using a timer. Like there's basically just if it actually has an animation, it's just using a timer that it's counting, and it says how many frames so it says how many frames the screen has to draw for each frame of animation. So if you look at like the explosion animation, let me refresh this. If you look at the explosion animation, it's, you know, however many frames it is, right? And all that's done is there's just a timer that says, you know, for every frame that the game updates, count up 1, and then, you know, this is a simple animation where there's no variable time per frame. Like, you could, if you have a very sophisticated animation, you could do something where each frame lasts for a different amount of time. You know, if you've ever played with, if you haven't, it's probably a good thing to play around with to kind of get a sense of how all this works. If you've ever played with building an animated GIF, or an animated GIF if you prefer, it supports the ability to say, okay, like, you have this one frame and it lasts for so many frames for the frames per second, and then you have the second frame and then that lasts for so many frames, and so on and so forth. That's exactly what we're doing here. I just took that because it's an easy paradigm to implement. And it works well. I mean, there are pretty sophisticated animated GIFs, you know, in terms of like what they support, animation wise. And that's really all you need is, you know, variable frame delay, for the most part. I mean, you can get into like way more complex animations, obviously, but for something like a small sprite, that's pretty sufficient. Now, the reason you want it to be variable is, like, for something like a walk cycle, you do need it to have some variability to make it look natural. Like a good walk cycle, it's not just a standard, unless it's a very high resolution walk cycle where they have a lot of frames of animation. Then you can do that consistent because the animation is handling how the natural gait of a walk looks. But if you have a lower frame animation walk cycle, the ability to have variable frame durations is actually really important, because certain parts of the walk should last visually longer than others. So hopefully that covered what you were looking for. That said, we're about an hour and 45 minutes into... No, we're about an hour and 38 minutes into the recording. And I'm getting tired here because it's almost 10 o'clock and I was up early. I think I'm going to cut it only because there's a lot to change with the map. Like, we're hard coding these map includes, and realistically this needs to now start becoming a little bit more... This should at the very least, like, all of this stuff should probably be exported by the tool and then just included in one file to be imported so that we can do this. So that's not going to get done today. And then the other thing, like I mentioned, is we've got a lot of code. Yeah, no problem, Yamato Special. I'll talk to you later. There's a lot of code in the export tool that probably needs to be refactored, but not today or even in the next stream, most likely. But these changes are going to be a little bit... They're going to be pretty large, I think. So I'm not going to take them on today. I think I'll do them next stream, and I'll probably try and focus on just kind of coding through those and doing less of my rambling talking. So let's wrap here for the evening. As always, thank you for watching. If you want to reach me on Twitter, I'm at Clairvis. I am also available through email at zelius@gmail.com. If you want to reach me on Video Game Sage, I am Zelius there, but on Discord I am Clairvis. Don't ask why. I am named different things in different places. I just am. So yeah, there's a Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee if you're interested in doing so. You can pre-order the game through itch.io to get access to the source code early on. I update it on a semi-regular basis, and it's the core game engine. It's not the export tool or the assets, but it gives you access to this code. If you're interested in being able to look at it yourself, eventually this whole game will become open source and available for you to look, but that will be when the game is done. And then I've mentioned before that if you pre-order the game, it kind of puts you into a running for a special limited edition physical cartridge that will be launched alongside the regular physical cartridges once that's done. So, hey Deedle, long time no see. So yeah, so that's, I think, did I forget to include anything? Should I do the normal YouTuber thing? Like and subscribe, and comment below. But no, definitely ask questions if you have them. And, as I mentioned earlier, I've talked to Yamato Special a few times on Discord, even voice chatted when he had questions. If you have questions, I'm happy to answer them as best as I can. So don't be shy. I love questions. I'm glad people are still getting a lot of useful information out of these streams and out of the zero pages. So yeah, that's it. Have a great evening, and I will see you all next time. Take care. Bye-bye.